Does your church still pass the tithes and offerings plate during your offering time? For a lot of us, that's just something we've been doing for years and we haven't really thought much of, but I think it might be time to stop. Let me tell you why. Hey guys, I'm Thomas here from REACHRIGHT, and we put out content like this multiple times every week. So if this is the kind of stuff that you're into, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, leave me a comment before we even start. Does your church pass the offering plate? Do you like that idea? Let me know why down in the comments. I've pastored for most of my adult life, and one of the things I know about churches is that change is hard. And a lot of times, if we don't have a really specific reason to change something, we just don't do it. And what that leads to is after years and years, we're doing the same things that we don't even know why we're doing them anymore. And one of the things that I think probably falls into this category is passing the tithes and offering plate each and every Sunday. And I actually have 5 reasons I want to share with you today about why I think your church should consider not passing that plate anymore. The first one is that we need modern methods for modern times. Let's face it, you and I, we use cash and checks much less than we ever have before. I was thinking about it. I haven't written a check or given cash at my church in at least 10 years. In fact, I don't know when the last time I was, and I've pastored churches and I give generously to my church. I just don't ever use cash or checks to do it anymore. And I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this. Fewer and fewer people are using cash and checks, and more people are using debit cards and credit cards. So to them that are using a credit card or a debit card, the passing the plate time is just something that doesn't make any sense at all. And that, I think, is the vast majority of your church. The second reason you probably ought to stop passing the plate is that it reduces the discomfort and the stress that especially new people feel when it comes to the giving time. If you're anything like me, I'm sure you've been in this situation before. You're at the grocery store and the checkout person somewhat loudly asks you, would you like to make a donation to an organization today? Sometimes it's the Make-A-Wish Foundation or the American Cancer Foundation, whatever it is, and then you're on the spot. You don't want to appear like you're some kind of a cheap person or don't care about these foundations, but at the same time, you don't really feel like you're compelled to give every single time the checkout person might ask you to do that. I think that visitors at your church probably have a similar experience whenever that offering plate starts to roll by. They probably get a little bit nervous and they wonder, is anybody watching? Is anybody looking at me right now? Will they know if I don't put anything in this plate? Do I have to put something in this plate? If you're gonna pass the offering plate, absolutely make sure that you let your visitors know that nothing's expected, but I'd make the case that it probably is detrimental no matter what, because even if they're not paying attention to that for themselves and they feel like they're off the hook, they're probably watching to see what other people do and trying to get a feel for things, and that's just not what you want your first-time visitors thinking about. If you stop passing the plate and instead maybe encourage people to give something later or online, it takes all of the pressure off and it helps that new visitor just focus on their experience and experiencing God for the first time at your church. And in the end, I think that's kind of what God wants from us. We never want people to be giving out of a compulsion. In fact, here's what it says in Matthew chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And I think that's really what this comes down to. We want people to have the opportunity to give out of the goodness and the freedom of their hearts, not out of compulsion and because other people are watching. Here's the third reason. Giving with a card is typically safer and it's more practical. A few years back, I was pastoring at a church in California, and this was back when giving online was much less commonplace. But back then, when I was pastoring at this church, we had a process that right after the offering was collected, we would immediately have 2 ushers together count everything up and put all of the offerings into a big envelope, write the amount outside of the envelope, and then drop it into a drop box that was kind of like a safe built into the wall. Then the next day, someone from the accounting team would actually come and grab the funds from the drop box and take it over to the accounting department and count it all up for us. And it was a pretty good system. Until it wasn't. Late one Sunday night, someone broke into our church, and it must have been someone who knew a little bit about how we did things, because they went straight for that drop box with a sledgehammer and they took it out and knocked it out of the wall. And we actually wound up losing an entire weekend's income, and we had a bunch of construction work we had to do to fix the wall right there in the middle of our sanctuary. I know this is a rare case and it's probably not gonna happen at your church, God willing, but it has to be said that it is safer to not have to deal with checks and cash cash on a week in and week out basis. And on top of that, it is much easier from an accounting perspective to have digital transactions as opposed to all of the processing it takes to handle cash and checks at a church there. Here's the fourth reason is I think that if we stop passing the plate, we actually make for a better worship experience. And let me explain to you why. When that plate is going around, especially for new people, that is their primary focus. And one thing they're almost certainly not thinking about is whatever's happening in the church service in front of them. They're not listening to the announcements. They're not taking in the worship experience. And in the end, that makes for an inferior worship experience for most people. So I'm not saying everybody is going to be this way. And chances are most of your church members, they've been doing this for years and they've become totally accustomed to it. But I'm telling you, as someone who has had conversations with new visitors who have felt this way, that is something you probably want to watch out for. So that's yet another reason why you should probably think twice before passing the plate this weekend. And here's the fifth and final one. When we stop passing the plate, we can instead focus more on intentional giving. Remember when I was a kid, whenever I slept over at a friend's house, his family went to church too on Sunday mornings, but their church was a little bit different from my church. And I remember very clearly, they would pass the offering plate at this church. And what my friend's mom would do is she would actually insist that every kid that was with her, her kids and any other ones that happened to sleep over at her house that night, would each have $1 that they could all put into that offering box. And it was probably the first time that I ever gave to a church was that first $1 that my friend's mom gave me all those years ago. It made a real impression on me. But here's the thing, these kinds of gifts don't really play a big role in the church's bottom line. If we're writing a check, we're probably not filling it out really quickly during that offering time anymore. You probably have already planned to do it. And in that case, you're probably going to put it into a box after service anyway, and you don't need that plate to pass around in front of you. Really, in most cases, the plate is going to be full of those last minute kind of afterthought cash gifts. And I don't mean to minimize that. Every single gift is important, but I think your church will be much better off focusing more on intentional giving. Focus more on the theology of giving and the purpose of giving, and talk about intentional giving. And if you're a church that teaches about tithing, talk about why you choose to tithe. And in the end, you're probably going to be better off encouraging people to give digitally or in some kind of an offering box after service, and you don't need to pass the plate in that time. Intentional giving is really where it's at. But these are just some of the reasons that I believe that it's probably time to stop passing the plate at your church. But I'm sure this is going to probably upset some people, but I really want to know, what does your church do? Are you still passing the plate, or have you guys stopped? Is passing the plate one of those hills that you're going to die on, or am I missing something in all this? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll get you next time.